I think first and foremost for me, that I would love to hear is just when that moment happened for you where you wanted to do your own thing.
So, I mean, for me, I was always a very ambitious, person, growing up. When I went to college, I was really on the pre-med route. So I never even had an idea of doing a business at all. I was like, I'm going to go be a doctor. In my family growing up, it's you're a lawyer, you're a doctor. You have to choose, something that was going to be a respected, career. And, of course, business, owners were respected too. But I was going, okay, I was a very, young person. I was like 18 to 21 years old. I'm trending towards going to med school and be a doctor. So I had my kind of aha moment when I was taking a little summer vacation in Chicago. I go to Chicago and, I'm thinking I brought enough money. I brought maybe $1,000 for a 10-day trip in Chicago.
Oh, God. That didn't last very long.
By day 5, I was already tapped out, staying at my friend's house, in the suburbs of Chicago.
And by the way, we've all made that mistake before.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, I was 21 at the time, and I was had a lot of time at my friend's house, and I started thinking of ideas, and I was very kind of fired up. I'm like, I have to do something now. Like, I have to figure out something now. I don't think I can wait 4 years of med school, then residency, to start taking action into my life.
Right.
So I noticed, on campus, these meal plans were starting to become more popular in Tallahassee specifically because we had no healthy food options at all. So all the students were signing up on different meal plan programs. And I looked at what was out there and I was like, I think I can do this better. I had always worked in restaurants growing up, and I looked at what was out there and I was like, I bet I can figure this out. I found out while I was in Chicago, one of the companies were actually closing down. So there was this now void in the market. So I was like, it was like now or never, right? Like, let's capture these customers that are out there looking for a company. And I said, okay, like, let me start now. And the moment that I started, I didn't know 100%, I'm going to do this 100%, but I just started figuring out step by step, and one thing led to another. And it was kind of like this, puzzle for me that I was like, okay, I need to find a kitchen. Oh, wait, I need staff. Wait, what else do I need? And I was figuring out business on the fly. But I remember when I started and I saw the response when we went from 20 people, subscribers initially and it doubled the next week to 40. I had kind of like the light bulb moment in my brain. I was like, I need to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Yeah. But I need to figure this out because this can be special.
When you had like the early stages, were you operating kind of like crazy? Like, I'm sure there was some.
Oh, yeah.
Were you like cooking in your kitchen or something, or
no?
How?
So like, I convinced a sports bar in Tallahassee. They were no longer doing any kind of food program really. Okay. So they were just a bar, but they had this kitchen that they were not using. So I said, hey, let me sublease this kitchen from you. I'll pay you, X amount, $1,000 to $1,500 a month. I was like, let me come in here and work overnight, kind of like baker shift hours.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So I would have my staff go in there at midnight and they would work until 5 a.m., 6 a.m. when no one was in the bar or whatever. Right. So we were, that's the deal that I negotiated because I always thought, I was like, well, one, at the time I was living in a fraternity house. We didn't even have a kitchen. So I had to find a kitchen. So at that time, I was able to kind of get that deal done. But yes, in the beginning I was cooking the food, delivering the food, doing everything, doing sales, marketing.
Right. In the beginning, you have to do it all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the craziest thing about it is the first day of service, I hired a cook and like 2 other employees, and I thought they were going to come in and they were going to cook food. I show up at 5 a.m. No one showed up. So then I looked to my right and left at my, partners at the time for my meal plan business. And I said, I guess we're cooking. Yeah, right. Let's get to it. And it was madness. And then I had to go to class after. And then,
And have you had any background with cooking?
Yeah, I had a very basic level, background. But I grew up working in a Jamaican restaurant. I've worked from fast food to some fine dining restaurants. So I had some experience, but not nearly like the level that I needed. Yeah. Either. So
would you call yourself a foodie?
I'm definitely a foodie.
Okay,
Yeah, for
all
sure.
right. Yeah, me too.
But yeah, the early days were absolutely crazy, and it was a lot of hustle and grit, really.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and you kind of get addicted to something new, right? It's for me, it was like, wow, you're seeing something kind of come to fruition that was an idea, and then you're like, okay, like that puzzle factor. Okay, I think I can fix this and solve this, and you kind of get addicted to that, and that's kind of what propelled me forward. Is like, if I can just solve a few things every day, I'm gonna figure this out.
And that's business. That's
Yep.
business. It's becoming a problem solver daily.
Exactly.
It was interesting when you said you were in Chicago and you're like, I got to do this now, because I'll never forget. I went to LA and I was thinking I was going to be an actor and a model and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in my friend's apartment, I was staying in my friend's apartment that lived in the Valley. And I remember being in his shower, and it was one of those showers that, like, as you're showering, the water gets higher and higher because
yeah.
the plumbing's so bad.
Yeah.
And I remember looking down, and the water was like all the way up past my calves. And I remember looking down at the like muddy kind of, I mean, it wasn't muddy, but it was like,
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't
Dirt.
gross. It,
Yeah,
was,
yeah,
it was
yeah.
gross. And I was like, I can't live like this. I was like, I have to make money. I was like, forget casting and like the struggle and being like damn near homeless. I was like, that's just not me. And I remember having that light bulb moment of, I got to make money, you know?
Yeah.
And just, that was kind of like that moment where I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. And at the time I had no idea what that would look like, but I knew I had to do something that involved making money, because I didn't want to live like that, you know?
No, absolutely. Yeah. Everyone has that kind of F it moment where
Yeah.
you're just like, I'm going all in.
Yep, definitely. All right, so you have this, you would call it like a meal prep company,
Yep.
right?
Initially, yeah.
And then when was the moment where you're like, okay, I need to pivot and start the restaurant?
As you know, in a college market, you know, those students or customers are turning over. They
Right.
graduate, they leave. So for me, I did the meal plan thing for 4 years, from 2012 to 2016. And towards 2015, that's when I realized I was like, I'm knowing less and less people here. Like my network, like we have to remarket, and like our
Right.
targeting strategy and growing this, it was starting to taper off a little bit. Like we had achieved some great success where we grew the clientele to 500 people. But then I realized, I was like, wow, I mean, I don't know how long I can keep on, you know, staying relevant. Right. I was like meeting with my interns at the time at a Starbucks, and they also said like, yeah, like, you know, your network is also shrinking. You know, like over every year, you're going to be 1 year more removed from the campus kind of, you know, people and community. So I said, you know, if we can convince 500 people to sign up on a meal plan, that's enough validation to open a restaurant. You know, we're putting out 1,500 meals
Right.
on a daily basis. That's more than a lot of restaurants.
Yeah.
So I got the idea in my brain and I just ran with it. And then the same thing happened. You know, it was a puzzle. How do you open a restaurant?
Right.
No one, you know, I didn't have any mentors to kind of lean on. I just read a lot of books and I just did my own research. And what I did, honestly, looking back, was probably the most unorthodox approach to starting a restaurant. But I figured it out and I created some extremely out of the box solutions.
And what was the really unorthodox thing?
I approached a restaurant that was in like a very, very prime spot in Tallahassee. And I looked at it and they had too much square footage.
Okay.
Like, they had 5,000 square feet for a bagel restaurant, for a bagel shop, essentially.
Okay.
And I was like, there's just
That's a big-ass bagel
I was
shop.
like, there's just no way they need this.
Right.
You know, so I actually approached the ownership, the landlord and the owners of the shop, and I found out like they had an interest in downsizing. And we actually were able to negotiate a sublease for a partial amount of their property. So I took 2,500 square feet. They kept 2,500. And I was actually the solution in their lawsuit. They were like in a pending lawsuit.
Oh, wow.
And we came in to solve it. But I also had some conditions. I told that company, I said, listen, I don't have the capital to put a type 1 hood system in here.
I was just going to ask
Yeah.
you, did you share the kitchen and
No.
stuff?
So we split everything directly in half, but
Oh,
no, we had to
amazing.
create 2 separate kitchens.
Right.
So obviously, so staff isn't like commingled or anything, and I convinced them to put a type 1 hood system in, and I bought certain pieces of equipment from theirs. I ended up flipping some pieces of equipment to make some money. Like I couldn't get this was back in 2016. I mean, still banks were not even remotely interested in having a conversation with any startup restaurant. They're
I was about to say,
like
startup restaurant is very similar to startup gym. Yeah. Banks are like, go away.
Get out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have the nicest conversations ever, but that leads to a no.
Yeah.
But like I quickly found out it was a waste of time. So I convinced them. I said, hey, I need some help financing some of this renovation for me to open. And I was able to
with the bagel restaurant.
Yeah, and okay. I paid them back, and I was able to do that through like our deal, our sublease. We drew it in there, and then I took out a couple loans from, friends that I knew. I was like, hey man, like I'm good for it. I'll pay you back. I paid them all back within 1 year.
Amazing.
And for me, it was just a lot of hustle and grit. But I had to figure out construction on the fly. I had to figure out permitting. I had to figure out marketing. I had to figure out training, operations, all these things. And it was insane. We actually hit a point where we were never going to open. Our permitting process took so long. Go figure.
I'm smiling and laughing because I'm seeing myself. Like our stories are very similar, in terms of like learning on the fly.
Yeah.
Like everybody asks me like, how did you get your business sense? And I'm like, I learned it on the fly, like
failing fast, solving faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it was actually, we ended up opening April 20th of 2016, the restaurant.
Okay.
But leading up to that, we were running out of cash. I was running off of the meal plan cash flows. And we were supposed to be
still doing the meal plans while you were trying to get the restaurant open.
Yes.
Okay.
So we were still generating,
right,
but we were exhausting those cash flows exactly to get open. So in March, we hit a massive cash flow crunch. And I was like, I don't know how the hell we're going to get this thing open for business. And I came up with just this like insane idea. And probably 30 days before we opened, I was a certified lunatic. Like no human should have ever talked to me. Because I was on a mission that like sleep for 4 hours, wake up, like grind it out the entire day to figure solutions out.
Yeah.
Repeat. I created a marketing strategy. I said for meal plans, because I needed cash fast.
Right.
I said, buy 3 months of meals. I'll give you a month free. So people were paying me, $1,000, $1,500 up front. And I was like, if I can get 10 or 20 people, like this will solve my cash flow.
I have to stop
crunch.
you for a second because it's exactly how I used to do personal training.
Yeah.
So back in the day, to get cash flow, I, instead of selling like, one training session at a time, I would sell like 3 months of training. So you get all the money up front to help your cash flow. So,
exactly. Yeah. And I created that solution, and that was the
and extra, it works.
Yeah, it worked. Yeah, we got people because it was a great deal. A month of food for free.
Exactly.
I mean, like to a college student, that's insane value.
Right.
So we generated like $20,000 in like 7 days, and that was what we needed to actually get the restaurant open.
Okay. And when you open the restaurant, I mean, most people think, you spend all this time getting a business open and then you open the doors and it's like, money just comes flying in. So explain when you open the doors, like kind of the what happened.
So my staff had 1 day of training. The night before. I said, guys, this is how it's going to work. Bowls with bases, veggies, and proteins. I showed them portioning for like maybe a couple hours.
Yeah.
I'll see you tomorrow. It's opening day. And that on opening day, the word spread like wildfire. And we still had our reach with our current meal plan subscribers. So we were able to send them out, emails and things saying, come to our restaurant, and send them promotions to come to the restaurant. So we had an active audience to drive in. And it was really on day one, some of my closest friends and, a lot of our like loyal customers were our first customers in the restaurant, having food. And then they spread the word virally, word of mouth went crazy on a campus, especially because it can really go far there,
right?
Because you have a contained kind of community, right? Tapping Miami is way more difficult than tapping a college market. Word can fly there.
Yeah.
So it was actually the biggest relief because I had just gone through 30 days of just like crazy stress, and I was like, thank God we have customers, coming in.
No, that's huge. I want to go back a little bit. Where did Vale come from?
So with my first brand, it was extremely like masculine oriented, fit, fuel, nutrition, and I noticed that women liked our food, but they didn't want to do business with our brand because women were not in the same mentality as they are today, where like fitness and gym, is like also appealing to them.
Right.
These were the days back in 2012 where women were just going to the gym on the treadmill and on the elliptical, and like they would just go do some core and cardio, and that's it.
Yeah.
And they would be there for like an hour, and that was their strategy to be fit.
Right.
So for us, or for me, when I closed down that company and I opened Vale, I said, I need to figure out a name that's unisex, that's going to be appealing to both genders, and all genders. but we, when I was going through my research, I came up with some horrible names, but
What's one? Give me one. That was.
I don't even know why. I was just like the number 8. I was like, is like a infinite kind of sign.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is like 8th food or 8th plate. And I got too obsessed on that. And I was like, wait, this doesn't make any sense. So I like, that's a really funny thing. But I actually was sitting every day in a Whole Foods I took 3 months off in between Fit Fuel and Vale. And I sat every day in a Whole Foods for like 8 to 10 hours. And I really loved the ethos of Whole Foods where, there were a lot about sustainability, high quality food, and the environment and a lot of other, just aspects that they were doing. So I would sit in their cafe. They also had a really good promotion about it was like $1 hot coffee, and I love coffee. So I would sit there and just get refills of, hot coffee.
Yeah.
I'd be eating just hard boiled eggs. So my daily cost was like $4,
right.
For me,
yeah.
Eating hard boiled eggs and coffee and sitting in a cafe. And I Googled, I was like, okay, old English words, like very like cool. Like I was always like into like, old English, like other like, old time words.
My original logo was in Old English.
Okay, there you go. So, I was looking up like mythology and all these other things, but I was going through a list, and as dramatic as it sounds, I'm going through alphabetically, A all the way down, and I get to V, and I see Vale, and the meaning was relating to the earth or earthly. And I thought about it, and I was like, okay, well, I want to use biodegradable containers and be a sustainable company and build a company that has values. I was like, okay, so we're earthy in the sense of sustainability.
Yep.
And I was thinking as well, all of our food is all natural and high quality and comes from the earth. It's not like these chemicals and like something that's awful for you with preservatives loaded on it and masking like it's food. So I was like, okay, our food comes from the earth. I was like, I think I can do something with this. And then later on, when I built the restaurants, I said, I want the interior design to be very like earth colors and earth tones. So we brought it full circle, and we try to like be sustainable with our build outs as well. So I said, okay, I think I can adapt this definition to mean to live an earthly life. And that is our approach. And that's how we bring it full circle, is with the sustainability commitment with our food, and then also with our interior design, creating an ambiance and energy that's going to be more like earth kind of feel, and a more relaxed, comfortable ambiance versus just, someone coming in and feeling like they're in like a sterile fast food chain kind of feel.
Right. I love the intentionality of all that.
Yeah.
Like, I love it.
You got to be detail driven,
100%.
For me, I think that's what, it was just the perfect word. And, that's where it came from.
You mentioned some books. Give me kind of your top 3 books that have helped you. Actually, let's phrase it like this. Give me your top 3 books that helped you kind of be able to start this. And then what would you be your top 3 books now after all the success you've had?
Oh, man. There's so many. No, there's so many.
I know that.
But I will say for sure, 2 books that come right to my mind in the beginning, like when I was like early 20s, that I absolutely needed to read was Grinding It Out by Ray Kroc.
Okay.
The guy who started McDonald's.
Yep.
52
I've read it.
years old.
Yep.
The book is 10 times better
than the movie. Exactly.
Way
more
better.
Detail. Yeah,
way more
exactly.
intense passion
right.
in that book.
So it's so good.
Yeah. So that book was just incredible to really showcase that, one, it doesn't matter your age when you're starting. It really is about that grit and tenacity to just persevere and push through.
Yep.
When you have something that you really want to do, not letting anything stand in your way. Another book that was for me was is like the guy who's pretty much the founder of Stoicism, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
It's on my desk.
Yeah, one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
I've reread it, a few times, and for me, I would, as a young man, I didn't have a real grip on how do I manage stress, right? And in business, there's an unlimited amount of stress
every
that
day.
will eat you alive,
Yeah.
and like you have to, the principles in that book really helped me understand how to control my emotions and govern them versus let them puppet myself. So like it got to a point where, after I read that book, I remember I was reading it actually on a plane, small plane, prop plane going from Tallahassee to Fort Lauderdale, started getting crazy turbulence.
Oof, those are
Crazy turbulence. And
especially in those
I'm
prop
reading
planes.
the book, like I'm reading the book like this,
Yeah.
literally. And it's talking about like stress. And it's like, are you in control or not? And it was talking about the principle of like, when situations are out of your control, why are you getting more stressed? Like, why are you attacking yourself?
Yep.
So in that moment, plane having crazy turbulence, I'm not flying the plane.
Yeah, exactly. There's
It's
nothing
going
you
down.
can do. Nothing you can do.
Zero. Why are you
Yep.
tensing up?
Right.
Why are you attacking yourself? Right? Because that's
Yeah.
what stress is. And at that moment, I was like, okay, you feel freedom almost when you can actually govern your emotions, and it sharpened. It helped me, especially as a young entrepreneur, really sharpen my tact and my strategy to weather those really hard downturns when the world is just crumbling in your world, right? In your business. And that to me, like I would say those two books specifically are like the first two I always think of.
Those are great.
Now, man, there's so many books. I'm drawing some blanks right now, but I just finished the book on In-N-Out Burger as well.
Okay.
There's two other books, Setting the Table by Danny Meyer.
Fantastic.
Incredible.
Yep.
And then there's Unreasonable Hospitality.
I was just about to say that.
I actually, at my company summit, I just gave that book out,
Okay.
to all of my managers, because I told them, I was like, guys, yes, we're a fast casual restaurant, but we need to give a high level of service to separate ourselves from these other chains and these other brands.
Yep.
Where I don't care if I'm serving the guests for 30 seconds to a minute. I want them to feel a connection with our brand, knowing that we care, our people care about them, and that we're there to serve them. And that book was just incredible at really talking about being intentional.
Yes.
About how can you really make someone's day. So I would say those two are the more recent ones, but they're worth rereading over and over again.
For sure.